Hi, I want to use the video blog today to talk about our discussion post on the right to education. And overall, I think we're off to a good start with this discussion post. You're exploring the topic in ways that make sense to you in practice, and some of you are drawing a little bit from theory that you've either picked up in the past or maybe a little bit from the readings. And I'd like to encourage you to do a little bit more of that when we get on the other side of the turn. And you'll hear me use that phrase throughout the semester. When we have a two-day post like this, in the first section of the post, I've asked everybody to just put their ideas out there for people to look at, and then there's a designated time when I've asked for you to come back with feedback, and that transition point I call the turn. So early on, a lot of interesting ideas have come out. Some of them are drawn from the law and look at what is the foundation for a right to education in law. Not much of that yet, but a little bit of it. Some of you have talked about particularly the comparison between a code or a rule that enforces something, and mandatory attendance in this case, and the right that those people have, in this case the students that are being forced to attend school. As you talk about the comparison, one of the things that hasn't come up yet are any ideas about due process. So and we haven't talked about due process in class yet, obviously, but whenever somebody is being forced to be somewhere and to behave in a certain way, are there any rights that sort of carry along with that? And in law, there is some expectation of rights that go along with a variety of different types of behaviors that are compelled, including people who are put in a residential treatment facility by the state, people who are incarcerated. And while due process cases haven't really been successful in the right to education, it's still an interesting question. The other issues that have come up in your initial posts have been looking at the equity versus adequacy. And I haven't seen too much yet about the intersection between those two concepts. But I think that would be interesting to explore a little bit further. To what extent does equity impact adequacy and vice versa? In other words, to the extent that a state has already decided to provide a certain basic level of education, where does equity come into play in that regard? So is it necessary that all schools have an equitable share of resources, that have an equitable looking curriculum, and so on and so forth? Or is equity only necessary at that very foundational level, and there can be wide disparities beyond that? And then sort of the next question becomes, how does it work the other way? So if you have sort of gross inequities beyond the foundation, then how does that affect what really is adequate? There's some more fat to chew on there on that part of the dialogue. The other thing I'd like you to look at is there are a lot of comments that were made in the first part of this discussion that I think are ripe for further dialogue and for challenging a little bit. And in this class, as with all the classes that I teach on the discussion board, we all need to be comfortable challenging other people's ideas. We need to be comfortable having our own ideas challenged, and we just have to make sure we separate challenging ideas versus challenging or criticizing individuals. We don't take it as a personal affront. Don't think that you're making a personal affront if you're focusing on the idea itself and providing a critical lens for us to look at the ideas that people have put forward in the discussion post, and to put a finer point on our arguments, to make our logic more crisp. That's what we're trying to help each other do, and that's an essential part of what happens after the turn. And then finally, I'd like you to turn your attention to integrating the readings a little bit. When you ask questions about adequacy and equity, and and where the right to education exists. A few of you, particularly towards the end, mentioned special education, where the right to education is made quite a bit more clear than it is for the general population. But beyond that, in the readings, even though we haven't gotten to special ed really yet, in the readings that you've done preparing up to this point in class, there's quite a bit to help you answer the question of the right to education that currently exists. So now's the time when you also start to pull that in to help you make your own case as you contribute after the term. So for those of you who haven't already, in my syllabus, I do have a little section on conversations and dialogue in the discussion boards that I think is helpful just to think about. Won't be anything new in there for you, but just to load some of these ideas of what a good discussion looks like before you enter into this dialogue with each other, I think is helpful, and in the past has helped my classes get off to an early good start on these discussion posts. So like I said, I think that for a first discussion post, we're off to a good start. I'm looking forward to seeing you sharpen your thinking a little bit as we move into the term, and then that'll take us into the weekend, and then we'll come back with some new ideas and some new topics in law. As always, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me, and I look forward to seeing you online.